Hello again, everyone. This is a little lecture for you on the next reading. The reading is called the Seraglio Letters. The G is silent. Seraglio Letters by a French writer named Montesquieu. It's a pretty famous work, and what I want to do in this video is to give you some context for when you read this to get them, because I want you to get the most out of it that you can to help you succeed with this. So it's pretty great material here, really surprisingly different. So I'm trying to get you ready for it. So what we're going to do is go through some background information. I'm going to give you some ideas on how to approach it correctly. All right, so let's begin. So first of all, Montesquieu himself, the writer, born in 1689, died in 1755, just a little while before the founding of the United States, was a French judge, a man of letters, and a political philosopher. A man of letters means simply an intellectual who does a lot of writing about ideas. And a political philosopher is a philosopher who thinks about what it means to be political, like what is politics and what is the best kind of politics. It's worth taking a moment here. Well, politics is really just the way people interact with each other in relations with power. And people have power over each other in different ways, and politics is how that power is negotiated. So it's not elections, it's not what's on TV. There's politics in a classroom, there's politics at the job, there's politics everywhere. There's politics in your friendships. How does that function? So Montesquieu is a philosopher of that sort of thing. So part of his fame is because he traveled widely, and he wrote about where he traveled in his journals. He kept these heavy notes, lots of notes about all the different countries he was and how they were, and he would compare how these countries were to each other. And from those travels, he developed some important ideas about politics and social order. His ideas were so important, so influential, in fact, that they helped with the writing of the Constitution. In other words, the American writers who wrote the Constitution of the United States based a lot of their ideas on ideas that Montesquieu came up with previously. All right. Now, the thing that makes Montesquieu famous overall, his literary fame, is the publication of a novel called the Seraglio Letters, which was published in 1721. Now, it's very important to realize it's a novel. It's a strange novel for us. It's what's called an epistolary novel. And what that means is it's just a lot of letters. The whole novel is made of a series of letters. It's one letter after another and nothing else but letters. So the idea being it's supposed to look like it's real, like, oh, these are real letters, but they're not. It's a novel. It's all made up, right? So the entire novel is made of letters between various characters who write to each other. Okay, so that's the novel. Now, you're not reading the whole novel. You're just reading an excerpt. We're just picking out certain letters from it. So you just have a small selection that you're reading. Okay, because it's letters and it's with strange names and stuff like that, I can't recommend enough that you track the names of the letter writers and who they're writing to and writing about. Like, I would take notes for each letter. Who is this? Who are they writing to and what's it about? And write the names. And I would suggest you write these names down like on a separate piece of paper or something like that. So you just can track all the names, because it'll get very jumbled otherwise. So you can see who's saying what and what role do they have. Okay. And speaking of role, here's a side note. You see one set of letters from, sometimes they call it the first eunuch, sometimes they call him the chief eunuch, sometimes they call him the chief black eunuch. They're all the same character. All right, they're just different names. Okay. So just do those two things while you read. Like, keep track of names. One thing, really. Keep track of names, who's writing it, and what their role is, and who they're writing to. All right. Role as in, are they a wife? Are they a slave? Are they a master? Are they European? Or are they Arab? Okay. Things like that. So the letters are meant to capture a social world of the period. So the letters are really trying to capture a society and as it functions, right? And this is very important to keep in mind as you read, and I'll tell you why shortly. So what I want to do right here is give you some idea about who these characters are to get you started, right? So there's one set of letters from a guy named Uzbek. Uzbek is an incredibly wealthy king or lord of his land. So he comes from Persia, and he's incredibly wealthy. Like, think of like a billionaire kind of a thing, right? Super wealthy, probably a king of some sort, right? Very wealthy. And since he's so rich, he has many, many wives, probably dozens. And this is a thing in the Persian societies and the Arabic societies of the time. Being really rich permitted you to have more wives. Having more wives signified you were rich, right? Because you had to care for all those wives. All right. So he's very rich. He's got a lot of wives. Now, it's important to recognize this idea of wife is not what we think of as wife. So these women were not free. His wives are slaves. They're his property. He can kill them if he wants. They're his property. He owns them. So they may be called wives, but they really are slaves. And they're wives and they're slaves. But his wives didn't choose to marry Uzbek. They were required to, probably by their family. So a family would like sell their daughter to Uzbek as a wife. Then he would marry her. But of course, he already had many, many wives. So it's just another wife. All right. So he's got all these wives, dozens of wives. Where do they live? They live in the seraglio. Seraglio, also known as a harem, is a kind of woman's apartment. It's the apartment for all the women. No men live there, just the women. And they're all the wives. So all the wives live together. And they also live isolated from the outside world, meaning they're never allowed out without special permission. And when they do go out, they go out with a lot of guards protecting them and isolating them, so no men can talk to them ever. They don't work or anything. I guess they're wives of a rich man, so they just don't ever leave without special permission. And it's very rare that they get that, and only for very special things do they get to go outside. So they're very isolated, just with each other. So now, Uzbek, being very rich, has many slaves besides his wives, many slaves. It's worth noticing right now that these slaves are of many races. They can be black, they can be white, they can be Asian. There's a lot of white slaves in this period, in this part of the world. So it's worth keeping in mind. During that time that this novel set, there were these pirates they were Arab Berber pirates from the countries North Africa. And they would attack and capture European ships. And actually, they've even captured some American ships at the time, early American. They would capture these ships and sell the crew and passengers into slavery. So this is frequently. It was a huge problem for Europe at the time because these countries were more powerful. So they would sell them into slavery in Islamist countries like Persia, for instance. So it's worth keeping in mind that Uzbek is very rich. He has a lot of wives who are slaves. He has a lot of slaves who are slaves. They're not just black. You hear a lot of black ones, but there are many kinds of types of slaves. All right. And he talks a lot about eunuchs. Now, a eunuch is a man who has been castrated or neutered, like a dog can be neutered, right? So because he's been neutered, he's unable to have sexual relations with women. He can't have sex with women. So that's good because what he does, he assigns them to take care of these eunuchs, to take care of and watch over the seraglio. Because now he knows these men can watch over the seraglio. They make sure they care for it. They protect the women. They guard the women. They command the women. But they can't have sex with the women because they're eunuchs. So the husband, Uzbek, knows that the women are safe, that their purity or their chastity is safe. That's the context that this whole story is in, all right? You should really take notes on this, by the way. All right, so the novel is a social commentary. It's a commentary about how this society functions. And so what you want to look at is what's wrong here? How does this work or doesn't work, okay? And so what this will mean for you as you read this novel is it's not so much about individual characters' psychology, like what's the character's motivation. That's a very modern way of thinking about things, and that's not what this novel's about. It's much more about the relationship between people and how that relationship works. And it's about politics, the political powers that are interacting between these people. So what are one of the questions will be, what's the politics going on inside the seraglio? Okay, so as you read, you're going to track all the names so you don't get confused. But you're also going to ask yourself some of these questions. First of all, you're going to ask yourself, who has and doesn't have power? How does the power shift around? Like sometimes one person has it, sometimes another person has it. How does it move around? How do the characters react to power? Do they all just surrender? Do they ever fight back? What do they do with power how do they react to it? Are characters as powerful, as powerless as they think they are or appear to be? In other words, characters might look powerless, but are they really? Characters may look powerful, but are they really? All right? So ask those questions of yourself while you read. And you'll want to take notes while you read this. So probably read it a couple times, write down the names, answer these questions, and then go into the discussion forum, take the quiz, and write the analytical analysis, the analytical essay. Okay? So best of luck to you. Love this album. I love this novel. Really, really great. I hope you like it too.